All right, so we should be live with another Leaving Young Earth Creationism, this time with Clifford Reynolds. And I'm the Dapper Dinosaur, your host. So, Cliff, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hey, good to be here. So I am 39 years old. I have a high school education. I never went to college or anything like that. I have a basic understanding of science. I'm not some genius when it comes to scientific topics, but I do have a basic understanding. So, um, yeah, I'm currently on disability, so I'm not working or anything like that. Um, just isolating, um, trying to stay inside as much as possible with this coronavirus thing that's going around, right?
Yeah, we're all doing that.
Yeah. Um, yeah, not much to tell, really. Just glad to be here. Glad to give my story as far as young Earth creationism goes.
Well, awesome. So yeah, let's dive into that. So, about how old were you when you became a Young Earth Creationist?
I was about 12 years old. I remember being at a bookstore, a Christian bookstore, with my mom, and I picked up a book and I was reading the back of it. It was on carbon dating and how carbon dating was, a big lie, basically. And I don't remember what book it was, but I remember that it was on carbon dating, and I got my mom to buy it for me, which she was, I'm sure happy about. She was a young Earth creationist and still is. So,
Okay. All right. So, um, do you remember what that book was, or who wrote it, or anything, or what?
I don't. I just remember it was on carbon dating, and I do remember another book that I read when I was about that age by Dwayne Gish. It was the fossils evolution. The fossils say no. Um, I basically I remember the basics of that one. Um,
Okay.
so
I actually have the updated version of that. Evolution: The Fossils Still Say No.
oh yeah,
Yeah, so that was by the Institute, or that was put out by the Institute for Creation Research, which around the time that I think both of us were young Earth creationists, they were sort of the premier young Earth creationism, I guess, outfit in the United States, or really worldwide, and they were putting out the big books about it. Um, let's see. Now they've sort of been eclipsed by Answers in Genesis. I think now Answers in Genesis is probably the biggest promoter of young Earth creationism. Although ICR is still around, they've mostly stuck to their quarterly publication, and they do a few quote unquote research projects.
yeah. No, I actually did a little background on Dwayne Gish when I was preparing to be on here because I wanted to go back and take a look at him because he was one of the influences on me being a young Earth creationist. And he was vice president of the ICR.
Yeah, so that's interesting. I don't think I've had anyone whose major influence in becoming a creationist was Dwayne Gish on the program yet. I think he was biggest a few, even I think a generation before you, because he was really big in like the 70s and the 80s.
Yeah, so I would have been, so I'm 39, so it would have been about 1993 when I would have become a young Earth creationist.
Okay.
So, yeah, he was probably fading from the scene at that point, but he still had quite a bit of influence, I would think. He still had,
Oh
and
yeah.
he had a bunch of books out. So,
Yeah, he's still, a lot of his books were still in publication. I think that's probably no longer the case. I'm not really sure. I haven't seen a lot of stuff by him in publications, but so that's interesting. So, were you already predisposed to believing this, or is this something that came as a surprise?
Yeah, I would say given the influence that I grew up with, I was predisposed to believing it. You know, my church was a little strange in that, you know, some people in the church believed in young Earth creationists, and some or creationism, and some of them didn't. Uh,
Hmm.
so it was kind of a hybrid, and my mom happened to believe in it. So I guess, given the influence of my mom, I was predisposed to believe in it. Yeah,
Okay. And but that was sort of the first you'd really been exposed to it in any particular way, huh?
I'd say so. Yeah, my mom pretty much let me make up my own mind on a lot of stuff growing up. Like after a certain point, my mom didn't even make me go to church anymore, and so going to church was something I started doing again on my own as I kind of went forward in my own journey and became a young Earth creationist. I became more devoted to the church, and so I started attending church on my own. Whereas before, you know, I would take it or leave it. So
Okay. So, about how long did you last as a young Earth creationism, or in other words, about what time did you get out of that?
I was about 17 when I stopped being a young Earth creationist. It just wasn't making sense to me anymore. Evolution just, you know, stood out to me as something that made sense, was legitimate, and young Earth creationism is just, it was ringing hollow. See, when I was about 15 or so, I attended a school at basically I was taking correspondence, and the church had a makeshift school set up in it in the old Sunday school classrooms. So I remember there they showed us videos by Ken Ham and Ken Hovind, and at that point I was still sort of under young Earth creationism's spell, and I could still believe the stuff that Ken Ham and Ken Hovind were putting out there. But by the time I was 17 or so, it just wasn't. Just it had lost all charm with me, basically.
Okay. So, and there wasn't anything in particular that made it lose that charm. It just sort of like was it reading more mainstream science, or did it just kind of fade away?
I think seeing some materials by some people in the mainstream, like Richard Dawkins and people like that, you know, I became aware that there were people other than, you know, young Earth creationists that I could take my inspiration from. I remember my great aunt and uncle. I was shocked when I found out they were agnostics, and I was just like, you know, how could someone that's related to me, you know, be an agnostic? You know, that's crazy.
Right.
And so they were an influence on me as well. Um, and I mean, I just at that point I'd figured out that people like Ken Ham and Ken Hovind were con men.
Well, I mean, that's I'm going to go ahead and say that's almost certainly true. I guess I can't prove it beyond any doubt, but yeah, they're very dishonest people.
Yeah.
All right. So, is there anything? So, let's say you look back and has the people that you used to, or that I guess that you still know that were our young Earth creationists. How many of them know that you were no longer one?
How many of them know right now?
Yeah.
Oh, all of them.
Okay. So
Yeah.
that's not something that you've been trying to keep under the hood or anything.
No, I by the age of 20, I had become an agnostic, and I didn't really. I hid it from my mom at first because I thought, you know, me not being a Christian anymore would really affect her. But even her, you know, a few years passed, and I came out to my mom as an agnostic, and Then I became an atheist, and now I'm an agnostic again. And so pretty much, yeah, everyone knows it. And
Okay. Has that caused any friction or anything?
not really. No, my mom is a very kind and loving person, and she, pretty much loves me the way I am, right? So, not with her really, and everyone else that's a young Earth creationist has sort of kept their mouth shut about it. So,
Okay.
yeah.
1 second. I need to do something. Okay. Sorry. For me, my chat is malfunctioning, so I am attempting to make sure that I'm in contact with some of my mods because there's a chance that if chats go in or anything like that, that I might miss them, and so I'm making sure if you're one of my mods and you see super chats, if you can message them to me in one of the other ways that we keep contact. Because I don't want to miss anything. And right now, chat is only updating on StreamYard for me, but StreamYard tends not to capture things like super chats or super stickers. So, yeah, if any of my mods could make sure to keep me informed on things like that, that would be great. So, sorry about that little weird technical glitch. I've never seen that happen, but
Yeah, no problem.
it's happening now, so that's just a quick heads up to. I know TD Lane is here. I think Ben DeMarcos will be, or I think yeah, a few of my other mods might be here.
Yeah, I noticed the chat's not scrolling down.
Yeah, it is in the internal for StreamYard, so I don't know what's going on there. Yeah. So sorry about that. So I'm getting from some of my other mods that they can see chat exactly as they should. So I'm sorry about all these technical difficulties, everybody. But yeah, I have had some of my mods let some of them know, like, hey, keep me informed on stuff like that. So, all right. So now looking back, is there anything that you think is particularly silly about your previous Young Earth beliefs?
Yeah, I mean, I think believing in the global flood is very silly. It was definitely one of those things that, now I look back on and say, oh man, how could I believed in such a tall tale, right? But something that sticks with me from when I was 15 years old or so. So I don't know if you know who Hank Hanegraaff is.
Yes, I do.
Yeah, he's a syndicated Christian evangelical radio host. So when I was 15 years old or so, I called into his show, and I asked him about evolution. And I remember he brought up Nebraska Man and Piltdown Man and basically shot it down in flames, basically saying that evolution was ridiculous. And so that's one thing that sticks with me is when I look back, it just it's really silly. I mean, that he's using these things that were debunked by scientists, to support his young Earth creationist viewpoint.
Right.
They weren't debunked by young Earth creationists. And the fact that there were a few hoaxes doesn't mean that evolution is untrue, right? So
right.
Looking back, I see through things like that very easily. But yeah, my 15-year-old self, I ate it up. I thought it was great. I thought, oh, here's someone with some real evidence for creationism, some real evidence against evolution.
Yeah, I find so a lot of times people ask, like, how could you be convinced by things that are so obviously incorrect if you stop to look at them and see things like that? But the thing is, for most young Earth creationists, I find that it's really the only the only even seemingly sophisticated attempt to address questions about the origin of the Earth and things like that are, if all you've seen is stuff from young Earth creationists, then what else are you going to believe? I mean, and in a lot of cases, people who are young Earth creationists, that is most of what they've seen. Or if they've seen something else, it's on the level of a textbook. And the thing is that textbooks aren't written to refute pseudoscientists, right? Like your textbook doesn't have time in your high school textbook to go into the reason why there having been hoaxes or misidentifications of fossils in the past isn't a problem for the theory of evolution. They're there to just get the concepts into whatever kid's reading it so they can understand those concepts and move on. And so I think that's one of the things is that the education of kids isn't designed to debunk this stuff. And so they can pretty easily fall for it if the people they trust more than their teachers, like their parents, are feeding them a lot of young Earth creationist stuff, which is designed specifically to counter what you will get in things like textbooks. It's not designed to counter the actual scientific literature, because it doesn't even come close to that. But their target isn't scientists, right? Like you're their target. You were a kid, you were a preteen into your teen years. This is when you're going to be learning about that stuff in school, and that's who they're targeting. They're not targeting, the well-educated biology graduate.
Yeah, for sure. And apart from the year I spent in the makeshift Christian school, the rest of the time I pretty much spent it in a regular high school, right? So I was exposed to evolution through biology class. And, at the time, that was pretty much the start of the end for me when it came to young Earth creationism, because that probably had an influence on me as well, right? Just going to biology class, learning about evolution, by the theory of evolution by natural selection, that definitely was an influence on me as well. So,
yeah, it does cohere well together, right? It all seems to fit together well with all the things we see in the real world. So it's easy to see why it doesn't seem like it's just ridiculous on the face of it. Like, why is evolution something that should be seen as absurd? Well, it shouldn't. And actually, the sort of top tier creationists actually even acknowledge that evolution isn't a theory in crisis. It's not something for which there's no evidence. It's not nonsensical. So, but it's interesting that it was the biology that kind of got you, because my last guess, it was geology that convinced him. So it's interesting to see how different people's different interests all can lead them towards the same conclusion that, hey, maybe the scientific consensus isn't stupid after all. Maybe these scientists know what they're talking about. So that's really interesting.
For sure.
Oh, sorry.
I was just going to say, and geology as well. I took geology, or I took earth science in school, and that obviously would have an influence on my believing that the earth is not 6,000 years old as well. So,
yeah, that is another big thing, is the age of the earth. And I've basically said it before, and I'll repeat it here. The difference between biblical flat earth and young earth creationism is that we've known for longer the earth isn't flat. That's really the only difference. If you basically the flat earth idea was kicked out of being current before Christianity. And so it's been a ridiculous idea for about 2,500 years. Whereas evolution has only been around for, a couple centuries. So, yeah, I think that really is the big difference. I think give it a couple thousand years, right?
Yeah.
And anti-evolutionists will be about the same as flat earthers are today. They'll just be weird hobos yelling at kids and getting arrested for it.
Yeah, exactly. And there are no flat earth scientists that I know of. Do you know of a guy with a legitimate PhD that is a flat earther?
I've never heard of one. I have heard of some people with PhDs in unrelated fields who are geocentrists. But that's even that is still looked at as just wacky and beyond the pale in a way young Earth creationism isn't. But what's the difference between geocentrism and young Earth creationism ultimately? Well, it's how long we've known about it. So geocentrism kind of fell out, what, 400 years ago?
Yeah.
So maybe if we give it another, 3,500 years, creationism will be at the point where geocentrism is, where it's essentially dead. But
I hope so, because there are people with legitimate PhDs, like Dwayne Gish had one. Georgia Pert.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Georgia Purdom, she has one.
Nathaniel Jeanson, Snelling, Andrew Snelling.
Yeah.
Yeah. Although I will say, so that I've encountered two kinds of PhD creationists, basically. The two kinds are PhDs in an unrelated field. So like Gish's PhD was in hydrodynamics, right? Which is not very related to evolution. In fact, if I remember correctly, he wrote at the time a highly regarded textbook on hydrodynamics, and it was used by engineering students. Okay, that's great. You can be a perfectly good engineer, like a structural engineer or a whatever, a hydrodynamic engineer. I don't even know what you call that, but you can be a perfectly good engineer and be a young Earth creationist. It's fine. Like, whatever. The fact that you don't know about evolution or the age of the Earth isn't going to make the bridge that you build fall down or the sewer system that you designed fall apart. So,
yeah.
But then the other kind are ones who start out as young Earth creationists and do go through the entire rigmarole of getting a PhD with the express intent of using that PhD as a cudgel to just beat people over the head with their supposed authority while giving out the same ridiculous and long debunked creationist arguments. And that's where you get people like Georgia Purdom. Like Georgia Purdom got a PhD in genetics, but she did it with the express intent of having a PhD in genetics so that she would sound more authoritative when she says nonsense.
Yeah, exactly. They're going through their dotting all the I's and crossing all the T's and doing what they have to do, and maybe even telling lies to get a PhD so that they can, exactly. Just, I'm an authority because I have a PhD. You should listen to me.
Yeah. Oh, and I'm getting a few reports of buffering and the chat still being a bit stuttery. I'm sorry, guys. I suspect there's a problem with YouTube because it's very uneven. It could also be some local problems. On my end, YouTube says I have an excellent connection, so data should be being pushed through to YouTube just fine. I don't know if maybe there are local problems with connections to YouTube or something. So I'm not sure. I'm sorry about that, but I do appreciate you guys sticking around for what is being a bit of a glitchy stream, and I wish it weren't. But there's not a whole lot that I can try to do other than just hope that YouTube fixes itself. So, so how do you feel about the various? We touched on it a little bit, but you said that people like Ken Ham and Kent Hovind are frauds. And so, how do you feel in general about the various creationist organizations? Do you think that most of them are more or less frauds, or do you think any of them are sincere? What do you think?
I think that they have, and it's very apparent when you look at the statement of faith, which everyone has to sign when they're in an organization like Answers in Genesis. Basically, they sign a statement of faith, which says that if anything disagrees with the Bible, then it's to be discarded. Basically, the Bible's our ultimate authority, and you must, kowtow to it. And so that really goes to show that they're an intellectually dishonest organization when they have something like that, right?
Right.
I don't think that many of them really care about the truth. I think they're in the business of selling young Earth creationism to, get donations and to advance their own agenda. So
Yeah, I tend to agree.
Yeah.
I think there might be a few of smaller young Earth creationist outfits where there might be a little bit more sincerity from the top people. Like there are a few like one man outfits out there by people who are, I think, might potentially actually be sincerely believing these things. Like I remember someone came to the church I was going to as a kid and gave this talk about young Earth creationism, and he wasn't associated with any of the big organizations. I think he was probably sincere and I guess sincerely deluded, but yeah, I tend to agree. I think most of them are probably fraudulent. And does that make you? Because I mean, that means that these people were essentially lying to you for what, 5 years of your life?
Yeah.
How do you feel about that? Is there any bitterness or anything?
I think when it comes to someone like Ken Hovind, yeah, I think that he's kind of slimy the way he operates, and the way he's definitely intellectually dishonest, and I don't think that he really believes his own script. I think that he knows that he may believe in God, but I think he knows that evolution has a lot going for it, and is the correct of the two. He likes to juxtapose young Earth creationism and evolution all the time, and I think that in deep down, I think he believes someone like that believes that evolution is actually true or has a lot going for it. He lies to make money.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm a little put off by that for sure.
Yeah. And I agree with you. I am too. It's basically why I do this, is because I consider a personal affront that these organizations exist, basically, because I was personally misled by them. Granted, they don't know who I am, and that's fine. But yeah, it's it's weird. I don't want to say young Earth creationism is a cult, because it actually doesn't have a lot of the. It has some of the information control aspects of a cult, but it doesn't really have most of the other ones. Like, young Earth creationists aren't telling you who to marry or where to live or what to eat, or saying that you aren't allowed to go and look at your school textbook or whatever. Oh, and hey, you just got a shout out from Standing for Truth.
Oh, hey, Standing.
Welcome to the chat, Standing. So everyone say hi, be nice. Always be nice. I have a nice chat. Don't make me be disappointed.
I technically moderated a debate with Standing for Truth and Conspiracy Cats, so.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
I moderated with Standing a debate with Erica, and was it Bill Morgan, Standing, that I was doing the moderation for? I think it was. So yeah, I've been on Standing for Truth's channel. He's been on. Actually, no, he hasn't been on mine. He has turned down both of my offers to be on for an after show. Gotta fix that, Standing. You gotta stop running from me. I can tell that's what's happening. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Yeah. So
Standing for Truth is really a decent guy, I think.
No, I agree with you. I disagree with some. Oh goodness, I'm sorry. But there may have been a loud bump because I bumped things. Sorry about that. But yeah, no, I like Standing for Truth. Obviously, he and I would disagree on many things, but he seems like a pretty stand-up guy. If he were around, I wouldn't see any problem with grabbing a beer, except that everyone is in quarantine, so I'm not doing that right now. Yeah. But assuming that weren't the case, I'd be happy to grab a beer with Standing and hang out. So yeah, I think that's one of the things that's important, is that people like, say, Kent Hovind, I might make an exception for, because he's basically the Joe Exotic of creationism. Like, he's got a weird compound. He recruits people right out of prison. He doesn't really pay them. He kicks people out on a whim. He's got that weird thing going with the serial monogamy that's been very serial of late. So yeah, maybe not Ken Hovind, but I think most people, especially the ones who do things like internet debates, like I'd have a beer with Standing for Truth or Bill Morgan, um, and a lot of the other people who are around on the sort of YouTube creationism scene. So, um, and I just lost my train of thought in your actual story about leaving Young Earth creationism. But so oh, the first book that you got was about carbon dating, right?
Yeah.
So, in your process of coming out of Young Earth creationism, is there anything that you learned about carbon dating in particular? Did you like look into that?
Well, I mean, I learned that there were other forms of dating and carbon dating, for instance. Carbon dating was just one form of dating that proved that the Earth was older than 6,000 years old. So that definitely, had an impact on me.
Okay. Did you ever notice that Christian groups like to do things like carbon date things like manuscripts of biblical texts to find out when they were written, or well, more technically, when the plant or animal material that they were written on died. But at that point, it's about the same thing as when the text was written down.
Yeah.
And so I always find it interesting that because of course none of those are going to violate young Earth creationism, right? Because obviously we know that the New Testament is around 2,000 years old. Like those, you're not going to get returned anything that's going to challenge young Earth creationism if you carbon date a fragment of the Gospel of Luke, right? Because how could it?
Yeah.
But I find that Christian groups become, well, not Christian groups in particular, but particularly anti-evolution and especially young Earth groups become more and more suspicious of carbon dates the farther they get outside of the sort of time frame when you can use them for fragments of the older New Testament. So I find that interesting. I don't know. It's like, oh well, but then they'll accuse scientists of being the ones who throw out discordant dates. And it's like, are you sure that that's what's going on? I don't know. That sounds like some projection.
Well, there's an awful lot of protection when it comes to young Earth creationism.
I think that's definitely true. Like for instance, we'll often hear cries that the evolutionists aren't being open-minded. Like, well, I didn't sign a statement of faith saying that I would close my mind to any other possibilities. Most professional young Earth creationists have done so. I haven't. In fact, I've changed my mind about things like that. So it was being open-minded that's the reason I'm no longer a young Earth creationist, which I think is probably true for you too.
Yeah. No, for sure. Yeah. I mean, I kept an open mind throughout much of my experience being a Christian, and just like things like the whole homosexuality thing, right? I was raised to believe that being gay was wrong and stuff, and then eventually I had gay friends, and found out that they're actually decent people, and not all of them, obviously, but most of them are decent people. And, there's nothing wrong with falling in love with whoever you're going to fall in love with, right? As long as they're consenting adults. So,
yeah. So actually, that kind of leads into something that I usually like to get into on these, which is did realizing that young Earth creationism was essentially nonsense, was that something that was a cause for you to leave your religion, or is that something that was a separate issue?
No, I'd say they're probably a separate issue. I believed in, when I left young Earth creationism at the age of 17 or so, I still believed in God. I basically, something that had a lot of effect on me was when I was 16, my 19-year-old sister committed suicide, right?
Oh.
And that really really had a big effect on me. And in a way, I was probably mad at God for a few years before I stopped believing in God. And So
I'm sorry to hear that.
yeah, well, yeah, it is what it is, right? But so yeah, I was probably I'd say they're probably unrelated. Yeah.
Okay, that's actually what I've found from most of the people I've talked to. It's interesting because in a lot, especially Ken Ham likes to really harp on this. More so, I think, than most other young Earth creationists, where he says that young Earth creationism and is the thing that keeps people Christian, and that they leave Christianity when they go and get these evil secular messages about millions of years and evolution and the Big Bang. And the thing is, I actually have a lot of trouble finding anyone who was a young Earth creationist isn't anymore, and that aspect of their belief is what caused them to stop being a young Earth creationist. I know a lot of people who are former young Earth creationists who are no longer Christians, but I also know plenty who are still Christians and are still former young Earth creationists, whether they're theistic evolutionists or old Earth creationists, or whether they're ID proponents or progressive creationists. I actually have a lot of trouble finding anyone who realized young Earth creationism wasn't true, and now they're no longer Christian. In fact, the only one I can really think of, I don't even know this person, but I know of him, and it's Paul Enns from Apologia. I can't think of anyone else I know of for whom that was the thing that made them leave Christianity. So I really don't think it's as much of an issue for people's religious faith in Christianity as a whole as the young Earth creationists want people to believe it is.
Yeah, I mean that's their racket, right? That's the thing that makes them money and gets them esteem. So obviously they're going to want people to be young Earth creationism and young Earth creationists, and they're going to want them to subscribe to what they're selling.
Yeah.
Because that's their livelihood. That's what gives them their purpose in life, to suck people in.
Yeah, I mean, it is like you said, it's a racket, and that's certainly the line they're selling them. Now, I do have another question that's not super related, but we talked about a little bit about it in the pre-show, which now you're okay with me revealing the country you currently reside in, right?
Oh yeah.
Okay, so you're Canadian. You're in Canada. Now, in terms of prevalence of young Earth creationist belief in the world, the United States is by far and away the top location for running into young Earth creationists, mostly because it was invented in the United States. So my question then is, I guess it's twofold. How is it that you managed to end up being a young Earth creationist in Canada when it's fairly uncommon? And two, what was it like being in such a small minority amongst, your fellow countrymen, I guess?
Yeah, it definitely isn't very prevalent here, and I guess it's just, I mean, the fact was, I was in a church with, probably half the congregation believed in young Earth creationism, and half of them didn't, and I happened to be in the group that believed in young Earth creationism, so. Yeah, I mean, it was, I guess it was, I was exposed to the other view for, as far as evolution goes, for sure. So it was a little weird being young Earth creationist living in Canada. And I definitely felt some pressure from my peers and whatnot. I tried to convert a couple kids over, I think, when I was younger. So
Any success there?
No,
No.
not at all. No,
Yeah.
they didn't really like what I was selling. So
I also, I think I only really tried once to get someone to be a young Earth creationist as a kid, and it's still, I mean, it didn't work. if you're not already predisposed to it, I think it's rather uncompelling. Yeah, I just don't think that there's much to it that anyone who's not already biased towards it is going to find very interesting. But that is an interesting difference because, from my experience, at least in the United States, a single congregation is very unlikely to have any significant split along ideas like creationists. Like you'll find a creationist church, and there might be one or two people in there, or who are quietly skeptical of the whole young Earth creationist thing. But for the most part, at least from my experience, any given congregation is likely to have a single stance on creationism as the de facto stance of that congregation. So I find it interesting that there was this big split. Would you say that's common in churches in Canada that have young Earth creationists, that they tend not to dominate the congregation?
I would say so. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a view that's on the fringe here. So, yeah, I mean, I would say even among the elders of the church, there was probably a bit of a split. Some of them believed it, some didn't. There were probably, a fair few of the congregation that were theistic evolutionists, even. So,
okay. Well, interesting. Yeah, it's always interesting to get that perspective from outside the United States because young Earth creationism is just so heavily centered in the United States. It's actually, I realize that I'm the one with the weird experience, but because those experiences are strange to me, it's interesting to hear about them because I don't know how true this is outside of the United States, but in the United States, evangelical Protestantism forms its own sort of subculture. And so and they like to call it Christian without being any more specific because they like to think of themselves, as the kind of ultimate example of Christianity. And so they'll have Christian movies and Christian music and everything gets a little like Christian brand on it. You can find the Christian brand, whatever it is that you're looking for. And so one of the things that comes with this is this young Earth creationist mindset. And so in the United States, at least, most young Earth creationists end up in young Earth creationist congregations who have ties to other congregations that are young Earth creationist, who share media, who, they'll membership will cross over depending on, someone moved here or there and they'll go to this other young Earth creationist church that they already know about because they already have friends there or whatever. And so you're kind of plugged into this whole extended network where you don't ever really have to go too far outside of a setting where everyone is a young Earth creationist if you don't want to. It's easy to basically have almost everyone including coworkers, if you want, in some parts of the United States, to just all be young Earth creationists.
Yeah, that's very true. And it's funny because even in like the Christian high school that I went to for a year, like we watched we watched some creationist videos. We also watched secular movies there during the break. Like I remember we watched Apollo 13 once and stuff like that. So it was very much kind of like go your own way there. It wasn't like, oh, this is what you have to believe and you have to be, consuming Christian content, when every waking moment you have to be, plugged into the church and you have to be listening to Christian music and you have to be watching Christian movies. And I remember, we did our fair share of that as well. I mean, I remember we watched, did you ever watch McGee and Me when you were a kid?
Yes.
Yeah, we watched that too occasionally.
Oh, goodness. Yep. I watched a fair bit of McGee and Me. Man, I was never super taken with it. It was always seemed like a weird format to me is my thing. Like, even as a kid, I was like, this whole, like, it's going to be partly live action with the iffy acting, and then we're going to go into, like, badly drawn cartoons and things. I was just like, not really my thing, even as a kid. But, no, I do remember watching McGee and Me. But I also remember though that the church I was going to, the Young Earth Creationist Church, they would hold a Super Bowl party every year for the Super Bowl, and they would have their own Christian halftime show that was basically football players who were in the Super Bowl giving testimonies about their conversion to Christianity, and it was a little cringy, but then again, they did provide some good food, so I would go anyway.
Yeah.
So
That's one thing the church did right, is they usually had good food.
yeah, I got to say that is true. For the most part, if you want some good food in the United States that you're probably not going to have to pay for other than by sitting through a church service, churches often have some good food. Yeah, I've told a lot of people, hey, if you ever want some really great Greek food or something, just show up around midnight or so at a Greek church on Greek Easter, and yeah, you'll get some damn good food afterwards.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess I can't knock churches for that. I think there is a value to that. I think it's hard to find outside of religious communities, because outside of religious communities, you tend to lack that commonality that centers those communities. And there's that sort of community life. And I think that's one of the reasons that a lot of people end up staying in churches that they don't necessarily agree with. For instance, I know some family members of mine have been in churches whose beliefs were not really very well in line with theirs, but they didn't want to lose that sense of community. And I don't know if there's a way to fix that. I don't know. It would be nice if we could find that same kind of community sense around other things, or without being as dogmatic about these things like the age of the earth or whatever.
Yeah, it's one thing I miss about church is the community. Yeah, I mean, talking to people after church, and you have your Bible study during the week, and you have your church on Sunday, and you have after church people gather around and socialize and eat food and stuff. I do miss that part of it for sure.
Yeah, I think it's really hard to find that outside of those. And I wish there were more options for people who are opting not to go to church for whatever reason. I even know some Christians who tend not to go to church for various reasons. And I think they miss that too. So I'll say that. I wish that my church had not been a Young Earth Creationist church, and that had not become a source of tension between me and other people in the church, which it did, and that I hadn't spent so much of my time alive believing such nonsense. However, it wasn't all bad. There were definitely some big upsides to being in that church. And yeah, I don't know. It's a contentious thing. And I think that's one of the things that we should remember, is that for most people, being a Young Earth Creationist is not really going to affect their lives that much. If you go into the office and you do your 9 to 5 or whatever, and you come home and you hang out with friends and you have a beer every once in a while on the weekends with your buddies, and you go and watch the ball game, you believe in the earth is 6,000 years old really isn't going to matter. So I do think that that's one of the reasons why my focus is not so much like I would like to take those people out of believing in creationism, but it's also one of the reasons why I don't really do videos about that kind of person, right? Like I'm never gonna, even if someone sends me a video of, a Sunday school teacher saying ridiculous nonsense, I'm probably not gonna do a video about it, because I really want to go after people who are trying to promote this as a whole and do it as some part of a larger mission, not just as, they did it as a Sunday school teacher, or, they just happen to be some private Young Earth Creationist. Because I don't really care about those people. I care about them in the sense that I want them to not be ridiculous about science. But like ultimately, I'm happy to let them, live and let live, right? It's sort of like the flat Earth thing, right? There's only a few people in the flat Earth that flat Earth debunkers bother to go after, even though they're not the only people who accept the flat Earth. But there's all those people who show up to those conventions, but they're not, they're not going online, to spread their nonsense. They're not yelling at school children. They're not trying to sue people for debunking them, things like that. So Yeah, I do try to make it clear that the channel is not about, you know, your neighbor who just happens to believe that Noah's flood is as a real global flood that happened 4,000 years ago. I'm like, whatever. Silly, but it shouldn't be. I don't even think people like that should be held up for ridicule. Really, you know, they should be approached with care, especially since it's not really their fault that they believe these things.
You
At least
know,
I think so.
they've been deceived.
Yeah, I would say that that's the case. Um, but it becomes less the case the more education they get. So, I'm sorry, if you manage to get through like a PhD program in a related field, you have to have been dishonest about something at that point. Like Georgia Purdom is a liar. I know she's a liar because I know that she knows too much to say the things that she does.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So, well, so I guess we're coming up to when I'm going to open it up to Q&A. But before we do, I'd like to say, do you do anything in terms of countering error creationism or anything? Do you have any like, do you write about it or make any videos about it or anything?
No, not personally. I mean, you know, I will engage with people who believe in it, and I will, you know, sometimes bring up points and things they might want to consider. But you know, I'm not out there on the internet making videos on it, or you know, I don't have a blog about it or anything like that.
Right. Well, I mean, there's no reason you should feel obligated to either. I mean, it's a weird niche little thing that's
Yeah.
not easy to. I mean, I still consider myself trying to break into it as a thing. I'm still very much new at all of this, so
Uh,
yeah.
I've given up trying to talk to my mom about it. So
You know what? Me too. I never want to talk to your mom about it ever again. No, but serious. Yeah, I actually really did stop talking to my family about any of this stuff. But I don't know if you saw, but actually my brother started talking to me about it after seeing my channel, and so he started texting me and calling and talking about this kind of stuff, and so that's how he ended up being on an episode of Leaving Young Earth Creationism. So,
he's still a Christian, right?
I believe the answer to that question that he gave was no, not really.
Oh, okay.
I think he'd probably describe himself as basically unaffiliated.
Oh, okay.
I don't think he knows what label he would apply to himself. I don't really think he cares.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, I think he's sort of loosely deistic. Like he does, as far as I know, still believe that there's probably some kind of God figure that is out there. But I would say he would be very cautious about making any statements in particular about what it has or hasn't done and what it is or isn't like. We got a quick question. What country is Ken based in? Assuming that means Ken Ham. Ken Ham lives and works in the United States primarily. He does travel. He's from Australia, but the Australian branch of Answers in Genesis broke away from Answers in Genesis and started Creation Ministries International. So if you ever find anything published by CMI, that is the thing that's run by what I believe is Ken Ham's brother, who broke away with him because Ken Ham was trying to micromanage everything about the tiny little AIG branch that was left off in Australia when Ken Ham went to America to make the big bucks off of the American evangelicals, who are a much bigger segment of the society in America than they are in Australia.
Yeah.
So I think at this point we can open it up to some questions. It looks like my chat is pretty much caught up. So I think if in fact there are any super chats, I should be able to see them at this point. It was a little bit iffy about that earlier. So if you want to do that, that'll be great. It'll send your question to the top of the list. But other than that, I'm just going to be answering asking questions in order. So let's see. Let's see what we have. Let's see. I'm trying to see if we had any that were previous before I. But But yeah, if you have any questions for Cliff or for me, put them in. Oh, and Ugly German Truth says that he doesn't believe there was any super chat. I am also pretty sure there weren't any, which is all definitely okay. You don't need to super chat. Please don't feel obligated. I appreciate it, but yeah. And Miguel Francesco Ogar. Look, I try to answer questions, man. You should. There's always a fair chance. Oh, for $4.99 from Robert Legary III. Super chat with 3 exclamation marks. Thank you very much.
Robert's a good friend of mine. So.
Oh, good. Yeah, he said that in the chat earlier. He said that you guys were buddies. So awesome. Let's see. What's the difference between deistic and agnostic? So there's one of the problems with agnostic is that it's a word that is used in different ways in different contexts. Colloquially, agnostic is often a descriptor that goes on to other beliefs. In philosophical literature, it usually is someone who who claims not to have a belief either way about the existence of any gods. A deist believes that there is a god, but believes that the god is essentially hands off and doesn't really interfere in the day-to-day goings-on of the universe, but probably created it and may have some kind of broad moral principles that it prefers, but is not going to sit there and perform miracles and get involved in the nitty-gritty of what's going on Earth or any other particular place. But we do also have, for $2 from a Marvel girl, do you have any resentments for being brought up that? And by that, I'm going to assume that she means Young Earth Creationists. And welcome, by the way, Marvel Girl. It's very nice to have you. Thank you.
So to answer that question, hello, a Marvel Girl, another good friend of mine. Yeah, I don't really, because basically I view the people that brought me up and the people in the church and my mom and my dad to a lesser extent, I view them as being deluded, and so I don't really resent them for bringing me up that way, because I think they themselves were deluded, and I think that my mom did the best she could raising me. So, yeah.
Okay. We have a question from Vesta Freya, who asks, do you remember what denomination you belonged to?
So yes, it was the Alliance Church. They have branches all over the world, and my brother is the pastor of one up north. So my brother went a totally different direction from me, and he has 2 master's degrees in theology and Christian studies, I believe they are, and he's a pastor, and he actually was a pastor in China too for a while, kind of clandestinely.
Yeah, I was going to say that's a little iffy on the safety side.
Yeah.
Goodness. All right. Well, for $4.99 US from Vandalia 1998. Sorry, we have the question. So, what was something you couldn't believe you used to believe once you stopped doing the YEC thing?
I couldn't believe that you used to believe. Oh, okay. The flood. That was the big one for me. It's just ridiculous thinking you're gonna cram 10,000 animals on a boat, a big wooden boat, and built by an alcoholic and his 3 sons or whatever it was. I mean, and you're gonna float around for 8 months or however long it was. Yeah, the flood was a big one for me.
Okay, I think that's fair. Let's see. This is from Amy Newman. For Cliff, have you ever heard of the Socratic method? I find it's really good on family and people who may feel uncomfortable around these subjects.
No, I haven't. Yeah, please enlighten me on it.
So the Socratic method is it's named after Socrates, as he's portrayed in the dialogues about him written by Plato, where his usual method of discussing topics was essentially to just ask questions and then get answers and then ask more questions about the same topic to try to tease out things like inconsistencies. So if you look at the Euthyphro dialogue, which takes place while Socrates is awaiting his execution in Athens, right? And so his friend Euthyphro comes, and Euthyphro is famous for being particularly pious. And they have a discussion about the nature of morality. And through a series of questions, Socrates teases out of Euthyphro that his idea about morality being tied to what the gods think or do is somewhat incoherent. And so we have to think about our moral philosophy on its own. We can't simply just tie it to our perception of whatever divinities we happen to believe in. But he doesn't come out and state that. He simply keeps asking questions until he gets Euthyphro to admit to contradictions.
Interesting. Yeah. Something I guess I could try on my mom as an experiment.
I mean, be careful, because some people start to get defensive when you ask that many questions. But yeah, it's interesting, and I find if the person is open to the conversation, it can be very handy for really at least understanding what the other person really does believe. Let's see. From Miguel Francesco Ogar, we have, what's your favorite Skeksis?
Favorite Skeksis?
Yes.
I didn't know that I had one. I don't know. What is a Skeksis?
They are the main antagonists from the Dark Crystal film and the recent Netflix series, Age of Resistance.
Okay. Yeah, I don't have one because I don't really follow that. I'm sorry.
Hey, that's all right.
I remember watching the movie The Dark Crystal. I think was that the animated one.
Well, it was puppets. It was a Jim Henson production.
Okay, yeah, I remember watching it like a long, long time ago, but I don't remember what it was about or anything.
Okay.
Yeah.
For me, since I like to answer questions if they can be posed either, I tend to say Skekra, although there are aspects of the Emperor that I like, and I think he's probably the most well fleshed out as a character of the Skeksis in either the movie or the show. And obviously, all that fleshing out essentially is done in the show. But I don't know, Skekra is a little bit too charismatic for me to just say it's anyone but him. So there you go. It's generally Skekra, but I have my moments where it's Skekso. Let's see. Ugly German Truth says Critias, and that is another dialogue. So basically, all the things that we think we know about Socrates come from Plato writing about things that he allegedly said. So let's see what else we have. Sorry, I'm trying to scroll down the chat, and YouTube likes to just pull me down to the very bottom of chat, like at a whim. So I'm trying to.
Yeah.
Icarus says something about the ancient Egyptians had no booze. No, they definitely had booze. They brewed beer.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, Ugly German Truth says the one that Dapper loves to use so much in his videos. Yeah, I do have a clip from the Dark Crystal Age of Resistance that I like to put in there. So if you watch enough of my videos, you'll see this particular clip from Dark Crystal. Let's see. This is from TD Lane. What is the most ludicrous claim you've heard from a YEC?
I think the claim that the Great Flood carved the Grand Canyon has to be right up there with me. I mean, it's just ridiculous.
Yeah, that is one of those ones. It's just I can't even figure out how anyone thinks that that's reasonable, other than just self-delusion, I guess.
Yeah. It did a big loop at the bottom.
Right. Yeah, it's looping back and forth on itself as it's carving through soft mud, apparently. It's like, That's not how that works. I think for me, though, it might be the rapid plate tectonics. Have you heard about that claim?
Vaguely, yeah.
So, in order to explain the geological record of essentially certain depositional strata or even igneous strata and things like that, just basically rock formations that correspond on either side, especially of the Atlantic. Creationists will sometimes propose that Pangaea was the pre-flood world, or even earlier supercontinents. Like I've heard some say that Rodinia was the pre-flood world. And then all of the subsequent plate tectonics that's happened since then happened during the 1 year of the flood. And it's just like the kinds of energy that it would take to do that. Because you can fairly easily calculate, well, okay, what's the mass of these continents? How far are we trying to move them? How much energy does it take, right? It's just a simple work calculation. You get an answer in joules. And it's enough energy to basically vaporize all of the atmosphere and all of the water and turn Earth into a plasma-shrouded rock of death. It's just basically every time you look at the flood, you can find an indefinite number of everybody dies scenarios, including the people on the ark. Because every claim about it basically will result in the death of every living thing on Earth.
Yeah, like how are the saltwater fish going to survive in that environment, for example?
Yeah, that's another one. It's just, the whole thing is just, it's completely ludicrous. And Miguel Francesco Ogar says that he was so satisfied when he finally saw the scene from the Dark Crystal that I use. I'm glad I could tease that for you. Let's see. Okay, this is from Dark Knight Apologetics, who's been on the channel, by the way. We had a conversation about old Earth creationism. So if you haven't seen that, go check it out. I think we had a very nice conversation. I enjoyed it a lot. So he asks, have you ever watched Avatar: The Last Airbender? And if so, do you agree that The Last Airbender by Shyamalan does not exist?
Oh, interesting question. No, you know what? I didn't, and I didn't hear great things about it. So I'm really questioning whether I should go back and watch it, but no.
I would say don't bother watching The Last Airbender by Shyamalan, but if you like, if you generally like anime, Avatar: The Last Airbender, I hear is very highly regarded. I haven't seen it. I don't watch a whole lot of anime. I don't know. I just, when it comes to Japanese media, I like Godzilla. I'll say that.
Yeah. I'm not big on Japanese media either, to be honest. No.
From Robert, make sure I'm saying this right. Is it Legere? Legere? Okay, so from Robert Legere III, apparently, we have. Oh goodness! Then it went away because I scrolled a little bit. Where'd it go? I'm sorry about this. I just saw a question mark on the end of it, and now it's gone.
How much wood would a woodchuck? Yeah.
How much wood would a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood?
I think at least a cord or two. I think if a woodchuck could chuck wood, it would chuck quite a bit of wood. Enough for you to, supply your wood potbelly stove for, winter at least.
Okay, well, I'd say a woodchuck would chuck all the wood a woodchuck could if a woodchuck could chuck wood.
Fair enough.
Let's see. From a Marvel girl, is there anything you miss about being in the religion?
Yes. I miss the social aspect like they were talking about. I knew some really good people in that church, and I don't get to see them anymore, unfortunately. And I actually went back and for Christmas this year, I actually went to the New Year's Eve, the Christmas Eve service, and it was good. Afterwards there was hot chocolate and some, treats, some food.
It's hard to beat that.
Yeah. Yeah, that was nice, and it was nice to catch up with some of the people that I hadn't seen in years, and they were very welcoming. So,
Good.
yeah.
That's nice. I'm glad because there are occasions where returning to a religious body after you no longer are in that religion can be a little iffy. But I find that that's the less that's the case, the less that they are willing to welcome you back as at least a friend. The worse that religious group was in the first place.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and oh, by the way, 1 Minute Debunk has stopped by. Welcome, 1 Minute Debunk. Glad to see you here. Let's see. Mage Grey Wolf, I guess this is for me. It's a bit odd, but I recently heard a creationist say that cytochrome B disproves evolution, and cytochrome B is a gene on ribosomes. Would you be interested in tackling this claim in a video? I would certainly, at the very least, be interested in seeing that claim. I can't say for certain whether or not I want to tackle it. I would have to, check it out and see what claims were being made and what kinds of things I would have to look into as far as countering that claim and things like that. And I might want to consult with a few other friends in sort of the creationist debunking community, if you will. So yeah. I'm definitely interested in taking a look at that. I can't promise that I'll do a video about it, but yeah, send me something about that. Let's see. Oh, everyone's talking about the Avatar movie. Oh man, that opened up a can of worms. Everyone's claiming to have no knowledge about the Avatar movie. Well, I'm going to wait for a few more questions, and while I do, I'm going to go into a little bit of channel news because there's not much to say, but there is going to be a little bit. I'm hoping that Monday there's going to be a stream with Landon. If that's the case, then there probably won't be anything happening next Saturday, because I don't really want to do 4 streams or whatever in the course of like a week. Streams are fun, but I also need to keep it at a pace that's not going to drive me crazy. So Tuesday, unless Bent Hovind gets stuck at work or something, should be Kent with Bent 26. The one that almost didn't happen ever is the title of it. Then Thursday will be, right now, it's on track to be the next update on the Speculative Evolution project. So if you've been waiting for that, it's coming. There was a bit of a gap because I fell somewhat behind on getting things added to the World Anvil and creating images for them. Because, well, some things came up that needed to be dealt with, and it put that project a little bit lower on the priority stack. But that is something I'm planning on doing the update. I'm probably going to do the audio work for it Monday, get all the art done, get the animation done, edit it all on Tuesday or maybe Wednesday, and it should be ready to go on Thursday. So it is pretty much done. I have to write a little bit more of the script, but most of the script is actually just me reading through the World Anvil page, which is already written. So yeah, look forward to that. But I think we have a few more. Let's see. From TD Lane. If you don't want the Inquisition knocking on your door, I suggest you don't talk about an Airbender movie that doesn't exist. Yeah, it's fair. It's a fair point. Let's see. Miguel Francesco. Yes, you do need to watch the Spec Evo project. It's a lot of fun. And when it starts back up for Phase 3, when Phase 3 starts up, you'll be able to contribute. Come on, everybody. You got to have more questions for Clifford. Oh, since Trim Tarask isn't here to ask it, I'll ask it for him. So he asks all of my guests this, and it is, how do you feel about pineapple on pizza?
I'm for it. You know what? I don't know what the big deal is about it. If you don't like pineapple on pizza, then no one's forcing you at gunpoint to eat it. So that's what I figure.
Okay. Well, you are from the country that invented it.
Very true. We also invented back bacon,
Hmm.
or Canadian bacon, as they like to call it.
You mean ham?
Well, yeah.
All right. Well, here's one for you. If you could be a dinosaur, and I'm paraphrasing a little bit, which one would you be?
Oh, I'd have to go with the Allosaurus, I think.
Allosaurus. All right. Allosaurus is a pretty good choice. Very common fossil. It's one of the reasons why pretty much any museum with dinosaurs has an Allosaurus specimen, because Allosaurus makes up about 50% of the vertebrate fossils that you find in the Morrison Formation, which is
Okay.
crazy. There's some suspicion that this is primarily because of a taphonomic bias. So I don't know if people here know what a taphonomy is, but it's the science of how and why things become fossilized. And a taphonomic bias means that some things are more likely to be fossilized than others due to whatever the environment is, whether it be because of how the deposition is occurring or how animals are dying in the environment or things like that. And so the current idea is that there may well have been a strong taphonomic bias in the Morrison Formation towards Allosaurus, and we're not sure why that would be, but just the extreme number of Allosaurus compared to any other dinosaur or even just vertebrate remains it's weird. So let's see. From Beach Price, question for Clifford: does he see similarity between conspiracy theories and YEC?
I think so. Yeah, I think the outlook of where people are basically seeing that evolution is a conspiracy, that people are conspiring to lock out intelligent design and creationism from academic circles. I think there's a lot in common with conspiracy theories like flat Earth, where they say they're being censored and stuff like that. So I definitely think there are a lot of similarities. Yeah.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think YEC is less conspiratorial than some things. Like, I think it's less conspiratorial minded than anti-vaxxers or flat Earth, but there's definitely some of that in there. And you can just look at like what's his name, the guy who has a really slow, boring voice,
Ben Stein.
Ben Stein. Yeah, if you look at his movie No Intelligence Allowed, Expelled No Intelligence Allowed is I think the title. That's basically the entire premise of it, is that there's a conspiracy to keep intelligent design and the belief in God out of schools.
Yes. And then they bring up cases where people were fired for things like academic misconduct, and they try and compare it to people getting fired for simply believing in creationism or intelligent design.
Yeah. One famous one that I remember, I don't know if it was in that movie, but a famous example was when Andrew Snelling complained that he was being excluded from doing geology in the Grand Canyon because of his young Earth creationism. But if you actually look at the reason it was denied, it's because he was lying about his methodology.
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah, you can't just lie about your methodology. That's not how it works. Let's see. From trying to make sure I get the next question. Okay, from Robert Leger III for Cliff. Not sure if this was asked, but do you take everything in the Bible literally?
Yeah, basically. I basically thought that the biblical account of Genesis was correct. I thought there was a global flood. Yeah, I mean, I drank the Kool-Aid. I'm not ashamed to admit it. I believed in these things, which are very improbable looking back. They're almost certainly fiction. They have all the hallmarks of being legendary myths. Yeah.
Oh, and here's one that I almost missed, but from Josiah Hansen. Very important question. Which is your favorite Ninja Turtle?
Let me think here. Who was the one with the nunchucks?
If I remember correctly, that was Michelangelo.
Yeah, so I'd say Michelangelo.
Okay. All right. Let's see. Who? Oh, this is from a Marvel girl. So be careful with the answer to this question. It says, "Who is your favorite person on YouTube?"
Well, of course, it has to be Dapper Dino. No, of course, it has to be a Marvel girl.
And yet you're on my channel.
Yeah, I'm on her channel a lot, though.
Oh, okay. That's cool.
I stream with her all the time, so
It doesn't have to be me. I'm not even my favorite person on YouTube.
fair enough. You're my favorite dinosaur, though, for sure.
Nice, nice recovery there. I like it. It was clever. Let's see. There's a lot of talk about Ninja Turtles. Let's see. From Amy Newman for Cliff, did you ever have any doubts about religion as a kid or teenager that you pushed aside?
Oh, yeah, I think it's only natural that I did. I mean, I became a Christian at the age of 4. My mom led me through the whole, becoming born again thing. And yeah, from an early age, I had doubts. I had a lot of doubts in the thing my dad used to tell me because he was very bigoted and very old school, and so I used to doubt a lot of the stuff he'd tell me about various things, including religion.
Okay. This is from S. Bendit. What is, and this is similar to one you've already answered, but we'll see. What is the argument for what you see that you believe that is the most embarrassing in hindsight?
Ooh, that's a good one. Whew. I think the argument that dinosaurs lived with man. I think that's just on its face. It's just a ridiculous notion. People trying to contend there were human footprints with dinosaur footprints and all that. It's just it just comes off as ridiculous.
Yeah. No, that's fair. I don't actually know which one would be the most embarrassing. It probably would depend on how I'm feeling that day, honestly, because a lot of them are really bad. I don't know. From a Marvel girl, are there any pink dinosaurs? Yeah, flamingos. There you go, pink dinosaur. Problem solved. There were probably others, but I mean, there are probably others. I just don't know of any off the top of my head, but I'll give you flamingos. There you go. There are. It's a pink dinosaur. Technically, they're actually white, and they get the pigments from the food they eat, which is primarily like things like copepods and other zooplankton that they filter out of the shallow water. And basically, those, because they're primarily eating crustaceans, they have a lot of carotenoids, and those carotenoids then are put into the feathers by the flamingo to create a pink coloration, which is actually why they're sort of an orangey pink, because carotenoids are actually more of an orange red than an actual red. So there you go.
Interesting.
Oh, and then Ugly German Truths just typed in basically what I said. So yeah, there you go. Let's see. Yep, we have Loose for Almighty pointing out dinosaurs do live with man. This is technically true. Yep, birds are dinosaurs. There's never been a time when humans and there's never been a time when humans were around and there were no dinosaurs.
So I should have said non-avian dinosaurs then, I guess?
Technically, yeah. Most people know what you mean if you just say dinosaurs, though. Most people don't mean birds, even though birds are just as much. A bird is just as much a dinosaur as a stegosaurus is. Like, there's a finch and a stegosaurus are equal in the degree to which they are dinosaurs. So, let's see. We have one from P. Barnes. Question for Cliff: did being a YC make it hard in high school?
I'd say it made it hard in terms of trying to reconcile my young Earth creationist beliefs with the lessons I learned in school. Yeah, for sure. It did make it hard in a social aspect. I didn't come. I didn't really. Since I tried to convert some people and failed miserably, I had kind of dialed it back. I didn't really talk about it too much in high school because I was, I guess, embarrassed in a way that I believed in it.
Okay.
Because other people were very critical of it. So,
Right.
yeah.
Okay. We have a question from Beach Price. Is there a book that you would recommend to YECers that might get them questioning?
Well, that's a good one. I'd say what's the I've only read parts of it, but um, what's the one by Richard Dawkins? Is it The Blind Watchmaker?
That is by Richard Dawkins.
Yeah, that's a good one. Sort of explains how things could get to being the way they are with evolution by natural selection, as opposed to creation. So that's a good one. That's a good one.
No, okay. I think for me, I would probably suggest Finding Your Inner Fish by Neil Shubin. Because it goes at still a lay level of like technical detail, but it goes into a lot of stuff about the deeply rooted both anatomical and genetic homologies between all grades of vertebrate life, taking you all the way down to the way that the same genes that control digit development in humans control the development of the cartilaginous ray fins in things like skates and stingrays, stuff like that, and how you really are just a fish that's been put together weird. And so I would think that's a really good one because it goes and shows all of these really weird connections between all of these fairly distantly related organisms. So that would be one that I would recommend. From Dark Knight Apologetics, Clifford Reynolds, have you ever watched Power Rangers? And if so, what is your favorite season? Cliff, you there? Oh, I think Cliff dropped. I'll give him a little bit of time to try to get back in. I'm not sure exactly what happened. I can answer about Power Rangers, though. I have seen Power Rangers. Of course, I am partial to the first few seasons of Power Rangers because, I was actually a kid when they came out. So, yeah, the first couple seasons of Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, pretty big nostalgia kick for me. That being said, let's see. I'm sorry. Time Force was good. RPM was good. I like Dino Thunder. Those are probably the ones that are the most standout for me. I do think that the production went a bit downhill when they moved it to New Zealand, mostly because I just don't think the acting was as good. So, yeah, I think Cliff may have crashed or something. Yeah, Robert Leger, if you can see if he'll come back. If not, I'll just wait a few more minutes and then we'll just sign out. So, let's see. Season 1 and 2 are the best. I mean, yeah. I won't really disagree there. They are certainly the ones where there was a lot. They tried, I think, the most in the first few seasons of Power Rangers. I think to a large degree after that, there was a lot of coasting just on the name and brand recognition. The fact that, kids like schlocky action. So Zio was good. Dark Knight Apologetics. Zio was good. I don't think it was my favorite. I don't think it's. It was certainly better than Turbo, which came after Zio. My goodness, Turbo was just a dumpster fire. Did not like Turbo. No, I didn't think he would abandon. Marvel Girl, you're not a Power Rangers fan? We're gonna have to just get you to see a few of the choice seasons. There's a lot of crap in there, but there's some gems. Thoughts on Prehistoric Kingdom? I think I'm mind blanking on that one. Remind me, Prehistoric Kingdom. Oh, the video game? Let's see. Oh yeah, the zoo management game. Oh, looks like Cliff is back.
Yeah, I had to rejoin on my phone. The internet on my computer just completely shit the crap the bed there.
Well, that's all right. I mean, the internet's been a little weird today, it seems. But so I think the only big question that we missed was have you seen Power Rangers, and what's your favorite season or seasons, I guess?
I would say season 1. I used to follow that show when I was a little kid. So
okay. How do you feel about Time Force or Zio or Dino Thunder? Those were some of the other ones that got mentioned.
Never really got into any of them.
Okay. Well, for a while, my couple of my nieces were living with me on weekends, and my goodness, were they gigantic Power Rangers fans. So I've seen a lot of Power Rangers, a lot, and so I now know a fair bit about Power Rangers, and especially once I decided that I would stop letting my my older niece continually watch Power Rangers in space, because it's all she wanted to do, and I was like, all right, no, we're going to move on. We're not watching Power Rangers in space for the 4th time. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah, my nieces used to love watching Peppa Pig all the time.
I don't think I've ever actually seen an episode of Peppa Pig. Oh, and Dark Knight Apologetics points out that Dino Thunder, Dino Charge, and Dino Supercharge are the only seasons that the dinosaurs are exclusively dinosaurs. I can't speak to Dino Charge or Dino Supercharge because I haven't seen them, but no, not all the Zords in Dino Thunder were dinosaurs, because there was, if I remember correctly, there was a plesiosaur and at least 2 pterosaurs. So, not quite. So there you go. Are there streams anywhere for Power Rangers? I believe Netflix has most of the seasons. It might even be close to all. So that is there. I guess we can have you answer this too. Thoughts on Prehistoric Kingdom? I was sort of getting into that before you came back. So have you heard of Prehistoric Kingdom?
No, I haven't.
So Prehistoric Kingdom is a zoo simulator where all of the animals are extinct, basically. Ugly German Truth says, "Damn you, Dapper, always taking my words before I can finish typing." Sorry about that, man. So let's see. So the things I like about Prehistoric Kingdom are that they are spending a lot of time being very careful to pay attention to accuracy on the models and the skins. However, I feel like the production has, like the game development has sort of stalled out, and it's not really going anywhere, which has also happened to a number of other dinosaur and paleontology related games. It seems like the problem with that kind of theme in gaming is that there isn't really enough impetus in big enough game publishers to really fund a project like that sufficiently. And so it just ends up being a hobby for all of the developers, even if they're making a little bit of money. Like one where that's starting to happen, where that's really has already happened, is Saurian, which got something like $220,000 on Kickstarter to make a dinosaur simulator. and I don't think it's been updated in the last year. And it was originally sold as there were going to be like 6 playable dinosaurs. There's 1 right now, and this is 3 years after that Kickstarter campaign ended. And I'm pretty sure they're basically now they've run through that money, and the devs can no longer do it as their full-time job. And it's currently at a state where they've been saying that playable Triceratops is coming any day now for 8 or 9 months. So, yeah, I just think that there really isn't any studio with the money to really push out a really good dinosaur simulator that isn't also wildly inaccurate and also full of people with rocket launchers. So,
yeah, like some of the mobile games they have, I'm sure, have dinosaurs in them, but I'm sure they're not very historically accurate.
yeah.
So some of the mobile games I see ads for are just ridiculous.
Oh, we have a question from Beach Price. Which animal would you prefer to be our closest living relative? Beach's is elephant. So if you could choose a different animal to be the closest living relative of humans, which would it be?
I think dolphins. I like dolphins.
Dolphins are cool. Yeah. All right. I mean, I don't really have a problem with it being chimpanzees and bonobos. I know that there are people who feel like it's embarrassing to be an ape or related to apes and things like that. I don't really get it. I don't see what's so wrong with any of these animals. I mean, could be worse. It could be a tapeworm.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, I just don't really get that idea. And I'm not saying that's the Beach Price is saying that she would rather not be related to chimpanzees. I just really don't get that sentiment that I see where people are like, oh, these apes. It's like the the famous line from Planet of the Apes, "Get your stinking paws off me, you damn dirty apes." Like,
yeah.
I don't really get that attitude. I mean, granted, if I had just been strung up in a trap by a bunch of apes, I might say something like that. Oh, and the Evil Scotsman says, but we are related to tapeworms. It's true, but they're not our closest relatives by far. Like, I'm no more related to tapeworms than you humans are.
We're related to a cob of corn, too, but not very closely.
We're much more closely related to tapeworms than corn.
Yeah.
Miguel Francesco Orga says, I still find it funny how rats are relatively close to us taxonomically. It's true. So you have primates, and that's going to be the old and the new world monkeys and the tarsiers and lemurs and things like that. But then just outside that group, you'll find colugos, which are sometimes called flying lemurs, even though they're not actually primates. And that group of colugos, their extinct relatives, and primates and their extinct relatives make up the crown group of archontons. And the sister group to that is gliers, which is lagomorphs and rodents. So humans are more closely related to, say, rats or rabbits than they are to dogs or cats or elephants or horses or anything else, really, outside of primates and colugos. So that's one of the reasons why rats and rabbits are often used in drug trials, because they breed quickly and they're easy to get, but they're still closely related enough to humans that there is a reasonable expectation that they will have similar biochemical interactions with drugs than to the ones you expect from humans. So, yeah, it's one of the reasons that they're used so frequently, is that they are actually fairly closely related to humans. So,
interesting.
Yeah, little tidbits that you realize when you start really looking at cladograms. In fact, have you ever seen that big famous Wheel of Life cladogram where like all the names are really tiny, but you realize it's still only a tiny fraction of the organisms on Earth, and it's got like about like 2/3 of it is just different kinds of bacteria, and then like you get the plant section and animal section, and sometimes there's a little arrow pointing that says "You are here" on it.
Yeah, I've seen that.
That one, the typical one that actually gets used most of the time, the next closest thing to human is usually Rattus rattus, the common European rat.
Huh.
Yep. But it's far from the only mammal. It's just that of the mammals used, that was by far the closest to humans.
It's funny because dogs are man's best friend, but we're more related to rats than we are to dogs.
Well, one of the things is that the likelihood of two species forming a symbiotic relationship, because that's basically what dogs and humans have, is a symbiotic relationship. That likelihood is really not very closely related to how similar those two organisms are in terms of cladistics. Like you get a lot of like fungus plant symbiosis, you get bacteria anything symbiosis, you get frog spider symbiosis. So there really isn't a strong, as far as I know, there isn't even really any correlation between degree of relatedness and likelihood of forming a symbiotic relationship. So let's see. Miguel Francesco Orgar asks, what do you think is the funniest Kent Hovind statement?
I think when he was debating conspiracy cats and he kept saying, "I'm not prepared for that."
Oh my goodness. Yeah, that's pretty close. Honestly, and I know this is going to seem a little narcissistic, but I think his answer to my question about what a dinosaur is probably the funniest thing I've heard him say. And I had trouble in the debate not laughing. Because if you haven't heard it, then you just haven't seen the intro to any of my videos, because it's in the intro, and it's where I ask him, how he would identify a dinosaur if he found one. And he said, I don't know. That's an interesting question. I guess we'll have to do some research on that. And it was in the debate about dinosaurs.
And he's Dr. Dino.
Yeah, I know, who runs Dinosaur Adventureland. It's just just kind of embarrassing. I don't know. I think that's all I've got on that. But you know what? We've been going for almost 1 3/4. So I think that we're probably going to draw this to a close. If we get any final questions, I'll ask them. As I said, channel news, hopefully Monday will be a stream with Landon. If that doesn't happen, then I'll do whatever I want on Saturday. It probably will be the final episode of Noah Zookeeper. Tuesday is Kent with Ben 26, the one that almost didn't happen ever. Thursday will be the next episode of the Speculative Evolution Project. And there you go. That's all that's planned. If you're looking for me for the final, 31 questions or 30 questions? No, 30 questions on the 100 Questions for Atheists. That's been going on Cheshire Vic's channel. That will hopefully be happening once Erica comes back from her current trip, because she's a little bit off of the internet right now. So, and then also Vandali 1998, go head over to his channel, because in about an hour or so, maybe a little bit more, he's going to be having a live stream about baraminology with Corporal Anon and I believe Jackson Weed, at least. I think there might be a few other people. I might show up, but honestly, it's been a bit of a crazy week, and I might just take the rest of the day to just kind of decompress from it. So there's been some stuff that hasn't really been related to the channel that's been going on, but it's been not a great week over here at the Dapper Dino studio for unrelated reasons. So I don't know that I want to jump back on the internet right after I get off this. So sorry about that, Vandali 1998, and anyone else who was hoping that I would be there. But yeah, check that out. It's always a good time when Jackson Wheat is going to be on talking about cladistics and baraminology and that stuff. So there you go. That's it. Thank you very much, everyone, for showing up. It was great to see a lot of people here, especially some people who are either infrequent or relatively new. It's great to see you guys. Unidentified Leviathan, it's nice to see you back. Just noticed you there. Yeah, so I will talk to all of you guys later. Have a good week. Stay safe. Wash your hands. Cliff, you got anything you want to plug right before we get out of here?
Sure. Just like to give a shout out to 1 Minute Debunk. Check them out. And if you guys want, you can always watch me. I stream with the Marvel Girl all the time. So yeah, thanks for having me, Dapper Dino, and it was good to be here.
Absolutely. All right. Well, take care, everybody.